Thank you. First, I must apologise for my voice. 2 days ago, I couldn't have done this. Today, I think I can. I think it will last for 20 minutes. I'm here to make some arrogant predictions about the future. I want to invite you for the next 20 minutes to join me in an exploration. It's an exploration of the limits of artificial intelligence. What will it mean for society when artificial intelligence researchers succeed in creating sophisticated artificial personalities, artificial emotions, and artificial consciousness? And when robots are also endowed with the ability to recognize what we say and what we mean, and to carry on interesting, amusing, intelligent, and friendly, even loving conversations with us. How will society react to this new breed of person? How will people react to robots that say, "I love you," and mean it? These are some of the questions that have fascinated me for the past few years while researching and writing about the possibility of love, sex, and marriage with robots. Allow me first to explain how I came to be interested in the subject. Originally, I was a chess player. I went to university. I learned about some new invention called a computer. That's almost 50 years ago. I got interested in computer chess. Computer chess is a branch of artificial intelligence. I met lots of people in the AI field and other branches of artificial intelligence, and my interest widened. I became interested in human-computer conversation, where I've done quite a lot of work and been successful in a kind of world championship competition called the Levy Prize, which I managed to win twice. And then I decided to write an AI primer. And while I was researching the AI primer, I came across quite a lot of research on the subject of artificial emotion. My interest in this field was really started by reading a book in 2004 that had been written by the MIT professor Sherry Turkle. Her groundbreaking book, The Second Self, had originally been published in 1984, and in it, Turkle made us aware of the tendency of some people to develop relationships with their computers. Turkle described one such example. She did a lot of surveying amongst the students and staff at MIT. She found an MIT computer hacker who she called Anthony, who had tried out having girlfriends, but preferred to relate to computers. That quotation had a huge influence on me, and I decided to investigate to what extent the developments in artificial intelligence and human-computer interactions since her publication in 1984 had demonstrated a progression in human-computer relationships. Had matters progressed to the point where we can now say with confidence that in the foreseeable future, significant numbers of Antonys and their female counterparts will be falling in love with robots, having sex with robots, and even marrying them. It seems to me that such relationships are inevitable within the next few decades. Society will regard them as being perfectly normal by the middle of this century. Allow me to explain why I'm so convinced of this. It's based on my investigations into the parallels between the reasons why we humans fall in love with other humans and the reasons why people will be falling in love with robots, and a similar comparison for sex. Let us begin our voyage of exploration and discovery in the realm of relationships, just as I began it when I started my research, looking at the question, why do we fall in love? I discovered from the research psychology literature that of the 10 or so major reasons why we humans fall in love with other humans, most of them have parallels when we come to consider the possibility that many people might fall in love with the robots of the future. One of the major reasons that have been identified by research psychologists as contributing to the falling in love process between humans is known as reciprocal liking. Peter is much more likely to fall in love with Mary if Peter already knows that Mary likes or loves him. But a robot can be programmed to simulate the affection for its human, thereby satisfying this particular criterion and encouraging the human to become attracted to it. Another of the major reasons is similarity. Two people are more likely to fall in love if they're similar in some respect. Similar interests, similar personality, or religious views, for example. So if a user is fond of Beethoven and a robot is endowed with knowledge about Beethoven's music, and perhaps in addition programmed with similar personality traits to the user, it will again have a head start in its attempts to engender love from its human. Yet another reason for falling in love is being alone with the object of one's affection. In this case, it is easy to simulate this because the robot gets bought and taken home by the user, and the user has it at home, so the user is in proximity with the robot more or less permanently. And so it goes on. As we consider the 10 major factors one by one, for just about all of them, it's reasonable to argue that a robot could be endowed with the human-like characteristics that act as a catalyst in building emotional relationships. Let us now move on to the subject of sex, and in particular, what motivates us to have sex, and why do we enjoy sex? Here too, we can observe some interesting parallels by studying the literature from research psychology. It turns out that the most significant motivations identified by research psychologists for having sex, and the main reasons why we enjoy sex, have their own parallels when we come to consider the idea of sex with robots. So far as sexual motivations are concerned, an interesting perspective can be cast on the subject by examining the reasons most frequently given by the clients of prostitutes as to why they pay for sex, what they get out of the experience. One reason very often cited is a desire for variety, both variety in the sexual partner themselves and variety in the sexual experiences that the partner is willing to share with the client. Another reason is the wish for a sexual encounter that doesn't involve the client in any long-term obligation to enter into a relationship. But consider this. Both of these motivations can be satisfied by sex with robots. Robots that can be manufactured to be beautiful or handsome, of any size and physical characteristics, designed with the capabilities of delivering any type of sexual experience, and programmed to avoid making any demands for gifts, expensive dinners, exotic holidays, or long-term commitments. As to the parallels between the joy of sex between humans and the pleasure to be had from sex with robots, the clearest parallel is the pure physical pleasure of orgasm. There are corporations in Japan, in the USA, and in Europe that manufacture realistic-looking sex dolls selling for prices that range from $5,000 to $10,000 or even more. These are dolls made from silicone or other artificial materials that have no moving parts, no other robotic components, yet they can apparently deliver sexual satisfaction to their high-price-paying customers. Robots can already climb stairways, they can play the trumpet, they can conduct symphony orchestras, and they can move in other human-like ways. When robots appear on the market that move like a human in bed, gasp and moan like a human, and behave in other human-like ways during sex, what will be the effect on those who try out these robots? And how will this affect society's attitudes to sex? What kind of sexual animals will we become? I can see some of you looking at me in disbelief. Sex with robots? What a ridiculous idea. But fast rewind 100 years. Was the idea of same-sex marriage not totally unthinkable? Wasn't oral sex strongly disapproved of by the vast majority? Wasn't masturbation known to be physically and psychologically damning to the point that the medical profession was almost totally against the practice? And the Boy Scouts book of what you should do as a good Boy Scout told you not to masturbate. Yet today, all of these attitudes have been turned on their heads. Same-sex unions have been legalized. Oral sex is almost de rigueur in the majority of sexual relationships. And in 1972, the American Medical Association pronounced masturbation to be perfectly normal and healthy. My, how sexual attitudes and mores have changed with time. How much more will they change in the coming decades? Will significant numbers of people be falling in love with robots, having sex with robots, and even marrying them? Now let us explore some trends in the development of society's ideas about relationships and consider where these trends are leading with respect to human-robot relationships. This topic has now become a serious academic subject. There have been international conferences on human-robot personal relationships, and next month I will be co-chair of a symposium on love and sex with robots at the 50th anniversary conference of the UK Society for Artificial Intelligence and Simulation of Behaviour. It's at Goldsmiths College, and the symposium's on the 3rd of April, if you're interested. And this is one of the trends. The concept of human-robot relationships is increasingly being investigated by researchers from various disciplines. Excuse me. If you get involved in discussing the idea of human-robot relationships, sorry? 13. Sorry. If you get involved in discussing the idea of human-robot relationships, you'll quite likely find a number of people making the argument, if it isn't human, how can you love it? To help us satisfy any such skeptics, let us consider the love that many people exhibit for their pet animals and for their virtual pets. Some pet owners derive even more satisfaction from their pet relationships than they do from their social relationships with people. There was a survey in a park in Chicago that found that the majority of women over 70 who have a pet dog would sooner lose their husband than their dog. Love for a pet is often very strong, sometimes even stronger than a person's love for other humans, and can be manifested in various ways. The offer of a reward for a missing animal, an owner bequeathing an extraordinarily large sum of money for the care of their pet, even making the pet a millionaire. Spending considerable amounts on pet food, health care, and sometimes on their animals' grooming and clothing, and interacting with their pets redolent of human-human relationships, giving them names, feeding them from their own plates at mealtimes, celebrating their birthdays, allowing to sleep on the owner's beds. My wife and I have a cat on our bed every night. Talking to them and considering them as members of their family. And when a pet dies, the intensity of the owner's feelings of grief will often be very similar to those experienced with the bereavement of a spouse or partner. Sometimes an owner's love for their pet is seen in bizarre news reports. A bridegroom designating his dog as best man. A divorcing couple battling in the courts over the custody of their pet. There is even a website, www.marryyourpet.com, that offers you the opportunity to marry your pets for a suitable fee, of course. You get a nice certificate, and depending on how much you pay, you may get some other goodies as well. Would you not agree that all of these manifestations of love are also appropriate ways to treat human loved ones? Now let us transfer the focus of our attention from pet animals to virtual pets, such as the hugely popular Japanese invention, the Tamagotchi. A virtual pet is usually driven by a computer chip that's been programmed to exhibit a few virtual needs, a few virtual emotions, and some elements of a virtual personality. Being driven by a computer chip means that a virtual pet is, in essence, a computer in different clothing, just as a robot is a computer in different clothing. That we humans have evolved from a race that has the capacity to love our pet animals to a race that similarly has the capacity to form very strong emotional attachments to Tamagotchis, and to another Japanese invention, the Aibo robotic dog, and to other virtual pets, is surely indicative of the way that the human propensity for loving is developing. It's developed from pet animals to virtual pets, and in the future will develop to sophisticated robots, which, after all, will just be a technologically more advanced form of virtual pet. Why should we doubt that this development will take place? Why should the human race not extend yet again its horizons for to whom and on what we bestow our affections? One effect of the Tamagotchi craze in the late 1990s and of the similar Aibo phenomenon was to spawn a culture in which some electronic products are accepted as having lifelike properties. Going back again to Sherry Turkle, she explained a few years ago that as a result of this change in perception as to the aliveness of artifacts, and I quote, "People are learning to interact with computers through conversation and gesture. People are learning that to relate successfully to a computer, you have to assess its emotional state. You take the machine at interface value, much as you would another person," unquote. Will it be any different with robots? Will we not treat sophisticated robots with all their artificial personality, artificial emotions, artificial consciousness, and great conversational skills, much as we do other people? I invite you to think about this question, and we can discuss it over drinks or over lunch after this session. Let us now pause for a brief moment to summarize the trends we've been examining. Human emotional attachments have developed from being only for other humans to pet animals, then to electronic pets. Sex technologies are fast coming onto the market and will take over from the immobile sex dolls that have been selling for several decades. and sexual attitudes and mores have developed dramatically during the past few decades. So the next shift in society's attitudes, an optimistic shift, is very likely to be towards sex with technological products such as robots. These parallels and trends are all indicating a move in the same direction, towards a future in which intimate relationships with artificial partners will become commonplace. Before the skeptics among you decide that emotional relationships with robots are very unlikely to appeal, please consider the following situation. From the other end of an internet chat line comes the image of a virtual friend. You hear the seductive tones of its voice, you smell its artificial bodily scent, and it is endowed with all of the artificially intelligent characteristics that will be known to AI researchers 2 or 3 decades from now. You sit at home looking at this image, talking to it, and savouring its fragrance. It looks nice, its voice and its personality appeal to you, and you find its conversation stimulating, entertaining, and loving. Might you fall in love with this companion? Of course you might. Why shouldn't you? Pen-friend relationships long ago, even before the telephone spread throughout the world, established that people can fall in love without being able to see or hear the object of their love. So it is clear that being able to see it, finding its looks to your liking, being able to hear its sexy voice, and being physically attracted by its simulated body fragrance can only strengthen the love that you might develop in the absence of sight, sound, and smell. I hope that this brief exploration has opened your minds to the possibility of such relationships. And if you ask yourself why anyone would want to have a loving and intimate relationship with a robot, stop for a moment to think about all those millions of people in this world who are lonely, who have no one to love and no one who loves them. People for whom rewarding, loving and sexual relationships are only a dream. Think about the great voids in their lives that could be filled by a loving robot. For these people, the question will not be, is it not better to have a relationship with a human than one with a robot? The question will be, is it not better to have a relationship with a robot than no relationship at all? Thank you.
Right. 2 questions up there next to each other. Lady in grey top and gentleman in a blue shirt next to her.
Hello. My name is Aleksandra Przegalińska. I come from Warsaw, Poland, where I am an assistant professor at Kosminski University. And I'm actually I have written my dissertation on people's relationship with chatbots and avatars. I have spent a lot of time online. And we have also kind of made a collaborative project with my friends who are artists on avatars as prostitutes and generally, virtual sex in its all kinds of manifestations. So we've recently, I think some of us at least seen the film, right? Her. It's a film that is kind of, I think, maybe in line with some of the stuff that you have been saying here. Well, I have been tracking these relationships with robots for a while now. For instance, we have ICO project that I'm sure you know, this artificial wife of Mr. Letrung. He constructed her. She can talk. She can do some stuff at home, like kitchen cleaning, whatever. She can interact with him, I think, sexually also to some extent. She cannot walk. She moves on a wheelchair because he didn't have the money to kind of do that part too. The artificial legs, they are missing. But what I've observed, I mean, on this example and many other examples, is actually that it's totally not what it should be, I think. I mean, I don't want to be judgmental, and I think I'm not really that conservative, but the thing is that I've seen the future of artificial intelligence and transhumanism too as overcoming certain boundaries that we have right now,
can you
right?
move to
But I want to be very explicit about it. I think that actually what is happening in these relationships with robots is actually very petrifying in the sense that these sexual roles that these robots are assigned are extremely conservative. And this is not a future that I would like to see. I think it's very kind of in a way limited, and I am afraid that this is exactly what is going to happen, that they will be sex toys instead of kind of being our creative partners, right, in many different spheres of life. So I'm actually afraid of this direction. I think it's very possible, but it's not something I would welcome. Yeah, thank you.
Can I ask you a question before I answer yours?
Yeah, sure.
Is your thesis available in English?
Not yet, but it will be soon.
Okay, can you send me a copy? I'll give you my email address.
Yeah, I will, sure, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you made a very interesting point. Well, all I would say really is that we are in the very infancy of this field of research, and I think that when robots are able to communicate through speech and conversation with humans in very human-like ways, and to express themselves as well as humans do in terms of loving relationships, I think everything then will change dramatically. That is what I believe is the limiting factor in having robots that are sufficiently sophisticated for people to fall in love with them and marry them, which I predict will be happening about the middle of this century. I'm quite prepared to agree with you that at the moment things aren't what they will be in the future, and things aren't very satisfactory in many ways, but I think I'm optimistic about the future.
We have a plethora of questions. Pretty much everyone in the room has stuck their hand up over the last 5 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 4 brief questions, starting with the gentleman there, the gentleman behind in the pink shirt and the guy next to him, person down here, and then we'll take it from there.
Hi, my name's Tom Williams from the Zeitgeist Movement. I'll ask the questions really quickly. I just think it's a really difficult subject to talk about it in isolation without the interconnectedness of all the psychological baggage that people carry in this society and this culture value system. Anyway, the question is, how would you feel about spending 48 hours with an exact replica of yourself, and why did you have children?
Well, I'm not gay, so I wouldn't really relish spending 48 hours with an exact replica of myself, but I might relish spending 48 hours with an exact replica of a female as an experiment to find out what it's like. I mean, many people ask me, would you try sex with a robot if one was available? And my answer is yes, why not? You know, it'd be an interesting experience.
I'm going to be quite ruthless here on the questions because there are so many and we are coming up towards lunch. So quick questions, 2 there, 1 at the front, and then I'll do a next round.
Okay, my name's David Bishop. I've got a question. I'm just wondering whether some of these analogies, whether it's a problem with the broad definition of love in the English language. I'll just give you a very quick example. So I can say, I love ice cream, I love my kids, and I love my wife. In Italian, I'd have to say, mi piace, ti voglio bene, ti amo. So when you're saying love, I'm not sure if it's the same. Yeah, love can be lots of different ways, whereas some of the definitions, some of the examples you gave throughout your talk, I'm not really sure they're all the same love between a man and a woman, or between a couple.
I think...
hang on, we're going to take 3 questions. And then
I can't remember them. I have to answer them one at a time.
I'll summarise. So,
okay, yeah, because I mean, this relates to what the last question was saying. You seem to have just recapitulated the era of analytic philosophy in relation to synthetic philosophy. The obvious difference between loving ice cream or loving a Tamagotchi and loving another person is subjectivity and the infinite nature of the subjectivity of the other. And the obvious point of that is that if you fall in love with another human being and then after 2 years they tell you, I never loved you, I was just faking it, then that is disturbing to you. Now, if it was just a series of analytic effects, as you make out love to be, that wouldn't matter to you. So the point about loving robots or anything that's a given or manufactured form of pseudo-subjectivity is that you may be able to fool yourself for 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, that is not a real infinitude on the other side coming back to you. But otherwise, you will always fall out of that. And that really, I mean, we've done a lot of this in philosophy. It's a really old, silly argument, it seems to me.
Down, we have the definitional and the philosophical definitions of love, or
Obviously, love. Take me back to the first question.
Different meanings of the same word.
Okay, I think that with some people, when they say I love my cat or I love my dog, I think they have a very, very strong emotional attraction with their animal, and I think for many people it's as strong as it is for their spouse or their partner. I mean, this has been shown by some psychological studies. Next question. I'm sorry, I cannot answer the next question. I know nothing about philosophy. I've never read any philosophy, well, very little. I can't understand it, and I'm not a philosopher, so I really can't answer your question.
Fair enough. That's one easy. Sorry, another question.
Great.
Here.
Well, here's a question about business. I am Hannes Sjöblad from the Swedish Transhumanist Association. I've followed your work for a long time and I appreciate very much. My question to you is, are you aware of any robot brothels or setups that operate today?
Not robot brothels, but there have been and there are, I believe, in both Japan and Korea, hotels where one rents a hotel room complete with a sex doll and a computer with a whole load of pornography to get you excited. I think that when sex robots are available at prices that people can afford, I think robot brothels will certainly become popular.
Stefano Suti from Milan. I'm from Italy, so I appreciate the shades between the different meanings of the word love, but I'm pretty ready to admit that it is already possible to fall in love for a statue, a pet, a virtual pet, or a car, for instance. But speaking of sex and love partners emulated by robots, if somebody is in love with something which is not a human being, when human beings are plentiful, there are billions of them around, they are plentiful and cheap. So I suspect that the interesting thing is in the object of your affection is that he does not actually emulate a human being. So the closer the emulation will be, probably the less interesting the robots will be in the market offer of sex and love partners.
If you pass the microphone on.
I think that as robots become more sophisticated, they will do so in many ways. One way will be their appearance. They will become more human-like. At the moment, the most human-like looking robots are those from Professor Ishiguro's laboratory in Osaka. He says if you walk into a room with one of his robots, for the first 5 or 10 seconds, you think it's a human, but that 5 or 10 seconds will grow in time as time progresses. And I think eventually the robots will be incredibly human-like in appearance, in the way they move, and to all intents and purposes, they will appear to be like humans. Similarly with their conversations, similarly with almost everything else. And with the programming of artificial emotions and artificial personality, I think that robots will eventually reach the point where for a significant majority of the human population, they're interesting, entertaining, and companionable partners that people will go to in their droves. I think the interest will be massive.
Just don't trust one that looks like Daryl Hannah if Blade Runner has anything to go by.
Hello. I'm wondering, all your scenarios seem to assume an ownership, that we own the robots, in which we wouldn't accept the same notion for humans. Do you don't think it even would be likely if singularities happen that it's actually us who will be the robots' pets?
Yes, that might happen in the next 50 years, during which the robots might decide the question, you know, is it really worthwhile having loving sexual relationships with humans? I don't know. I won't be around then, so I don't have to worry about it.
Hi. Nick Tsinonis. I work with the online dating business for about 10 years, and we run machine learning algorithms to match people. We feel, there is an epidemic going on in the world of loneliness, but your solution might be a fetish rather than a kind of a norm. And yes, prostitution is going to be around, but why don't we use technology to actually put real people together rather than robots? And I think that, and better matches, and obviously social norms are changing. The problem, your problem, it comes around because we are life partners, and I think that's changing a lot as well. People are starting to form relationships where they can fall in love more than once. And I think when that social norms change, I think the robots will become more harmful to your psychology than helpful, potentially.
I would disagree with you, because I think the last point I made is a very important one, and it's the main reason I think that robot sex in the future is such a good thing. It's the huge number of people who have no way to form good relationships, loving and sexually satisfying relationships with other humans. Just think how many people there are in the world who have psychological hang-ups or psychosexual hang-ups, people who might be socially totally inept, people who might be ugly. There are hosts and hosts of people all over the world who, for one reason or another, cannot form good, lasting relationships.
We're going to have to move on to the very last question because we're hitting lunchtime. Up back.
Hi, I'm Jabida. I also run a singles group, not a site, called London Geek Chic. It's geeky people who are single. So for us, that's very, very relevant. But I also agree with all the speakers who are saying, no, actually, we should be encouraging people to have more human relationships. But I'm a technophile, and I can't wait until I can have sex with robots. But, I'm quite interested, running a singles group and being a technophile, about the details of what will happen. So my partner at the moment spends half his time in Yorkshire, and when he's not here, I use sex toys. He couldn't be more or less interested in that. It was just neither here nor there. But in 20 years, when there's robots instead of just, a disembodied penis shape, what I'm interested in is, what I'm interested in is there'll be a difference, won't there, between whether there's AI in this robot or whether there's not, and whether I'll be being unfaithful or not. Because when there are robots around, I want to be having sex with them, whether I'm in a relationship with a human or not. Okay. Is that weird? Am I weird?
You've opened a whole Pandora's box of questions which I won't be allowed time to answer. Are you aware there are already devices on the market, and more coming, that will allow you and your partner to have sexual interactions when he's in Yorkshire and you're in London? Already. One of the talks at the symposium at Goldsmiths I mentioned on April the 3rd is about a device called a Kissinger that will enable you and your partner to kiss from a distance via the internet. Okay, well,
I think that's probably a high note.
Let me just give one more brief answer on something you've raised, which has been raised by many, many people discussing this with me, and in almost every interview I do. The question of fidelity. Is having sex with a robot being unfaithful? Using a sex toy isn't being unfaithful. Masturbating isn't being unfaithful. So why should sex with a robot be unfaithful? I think you're on safe ground.
Thank you very much, David Lee.